faith, saw the world, fought for justice and peace. And this morning, our text comes from Micah chapter 5, starting in verse 2. Hear these words. But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are one of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is of old, from ancient days. Therefore he shall give them up until the time when she who is in labor has brought forth. Then the rest of his kindred shall return to the people of Israel. And he shall stand and feed his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall live secure. For now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be one of peace. Will you join me in a word of prayer? Loving God, as we continue to overhear the words of the prophet, may we find hope, strength, wisdom in our own journey of faith. May we look to you for guidance and assurance. For even though we may doubt, fear, wonder, we know that we're not alone, that you are strengthening this community of faith as you have done for all time. In your name we pray. Amen. 2 chapters from where we started in this journey into Micah, and already things have changed. Micah has talked about a potential future when people will turn swords into plowshares, weapons of destruction and chaos into tools of creation and hope, where people will give up their desire to dominate through violence in order to live at peace with their neighbor. But at the present moment, within Micah's reality, it's not peaceful. That time when people have given up their weapons has not come. In fact, violence rules the day. Fear, death. There's a siege now around the capital city of Jerusalem. It is surrounded. The day that Micah feared is already at the doorsteps, and things are looking dire. The prophet suggests that the reason for this is because the political and religious leaders of the day were corrupt and had led the people in a wrong way. He even looks to the people outside of leadership, the members of the community who have given up following the one true God of Israel in favor of the popular gods of the day and time. Things are looking grim for Jerusalem and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom has already fallen. Now, unless you're left on the cliffhanger here, I will go ahead and reassure you this isn't the day that the southern kingdom falls. In fact, history tells us that the Assyrians, instead of overtaking the capital, merely found a way for the leaders and the rulers of the time to pay taxes and all kinds of funds to the Assyrian Empire in exchange for them to rule themselves. It wouldn't be until about 120 years later when the Babylonians would come and invade and defeat the southern kingdom, leading the people, the religious leaders, all the elites of the days and time into exile. They will be a beaten people, filled with hopelessness. But for Micah, hope is not lost. Where will hope come, he says? Not Jerusalem, the capital city of the southern kingdom. Not Samaria, the capital city of the northern kingdom. Hope will come from Bethlehem. Bet Lakum, house of bread. Not the warrior center, not the military might of the capital, but the agricultural center. The place where food is grown and harvested, the house of bread. The leader won't come from some rich family, some family that is important or politically influential. The leader will come out of nowhere, from a nobody kind of family, like Saul and David before. We all know about King Saul and King David, and hold them in such high esteem, but we forget their roots. We forget that David was the youngest in the family and a shepherd boy. The family wasn't important, wasn't influential, but it is from this family that David comes and eventually becomes one of the greatest kings of Israel. Clearly, the kind of Messiah, the one who saves for Micah, was one who had not only peace in mind, but also the strategic and military chops to challenge superior forces and then establish peace in the land, much like Saul and David before him. Micah had in mind a shepherd, someone from humble origins who would lead them out of the current chaos and destruction and fear that they were living into a more hopeful and peaceful future. Every year I attend the True False Film Festival. You've heard me talk about it. I'm Micah's spokesperson, but they don't pay me anything. And it's a documentary film festival. Every year they show a particular film that they call the True Life Film, the True Life Film Fund. And you watch this film unfold. After it's over, the subjects of the film usually come out, and there's question and answering. You get to see these people in real life. And then they pack big, giant silver buckets, and they take up a collection, an offering, much like what we do here Sunday after Sunday. And those funds go directly to the subjects of the film, which rarely happens. It rarely happens that the people in documentaries benefit from the documentaries showing to them in some way that might help change their future, change their present, change what they experience in the world. We've given funds to Sonita, who was an Afghan refugee, a young woman about 15, 16, who was into hip-hop and made her own music videos, but seeking a different future in the chaos and violence she experienced there in Afghanistan. We gave to help organizations that would lift women up who are in abusive situations and give them a safe space to live. We've given funds. Other individuals around the world experience freedom and hope. We've given to families who live through the terrible reality of bullying. They've seen their kids be bullied at school, and we've given funds to help support them as they organize and find ways to teach about the importance of not bullying and in the schools where they attend. This year, we gave to the families of Ari and Bitate Uru Awawa. They are indigenous people living in the Amazon forest whose territory has been stolen by land developers and farmers without payment or permission. The film, The Territory, which will be coming out in theaters and on Disney Plus later this year, you should check it out, tells the story of their struggle to survive and protect their land, the rainforest. It follows both the indigenous people and activists as well as those farmers and ranchers who are eating away at the forest, burning it down, taking it without permission. They are burning and cutting down the forest to make way for grazing land. But the land is technically protected by laws that are on the book. But the governmental leaders in this day and time turn a blind eye in order to reap the economic benefits of destroying the forest. Ari was killed while filming and confronting these land thieves. In order to combat the environmental devastation of their homeland, the people from the Uru Awawa tribe have been filming and using social media and other methods to call attention and for an end to the death and destruction of the forest and the people who inhabit it. They are shepherds of the forest. They're not political or spiritual leaders. They're not people from influential families. They're just normal, ordinary people striving for justice, an end to violence and the degradation of the environment. They have stood up to the violent and devastating practices of the government and other citizens who seek to profit by the abuse of the land and its people. Friends, things are not right in the world. They're dire. You know this. I know this. We've enumerated many of these moments or situations in our world from this pulpit, Sunday after Sunday. I don't need to go through the list. There are things that are top of mind for you, concerns that you carry, worries that weigh on you. You see the things that are happening in the world, and you know that they're not right. Yet no matter how messed up the world can get, and it can get pretty messed up at times, there is always a community of faith, a movement of God's people somewhere in the world who stands in the gap. A community of people who long for the day when there are no swords, guns, missiles, tools of death and destruction, but only tools that create and bring about life. There's always a movement of people who are struggling and striving for peace in the most unusual ways, and yet has the most profound impact on their community and world. No need for military strategists, only shepherds tending flocks in the field. Perhaps this is why the early Christian community read this part of Micah and said, this sounds like Jesus. Not everything, but this part about this one who would come from Bethlehem and who pursue peace and help us live without violence or tools of destruction, this sounds like Jesus. And so as we heard the text this morning, that part should have sounded familiar. When you heard the town name of Bethlehem, I bet many of you were thinking, this text is about Jesus. Now, I'm willing to bet Micah didn't have Jesus in mind. Because if you read just a few verses later, it's not all about peace. It's about someone who will rise up against the Assyrians and unsheath their sword and put an end to their reign through violent means. That doesn't sound like Jesus. They saw Jesus in the words of the prophet, but not all of them. Because for them, in that early Christian community, Jesus represented a different kind of Messiah, one who saves, a different kind of king, someone who came from nowhere, yet someone who longed for peace. Instead of a military strategist, Jesus was a community organizer. Instead of a king, Jesus was a servant. Instead of someone who rose up in violent rebellion, Jesus taught how to throw off the shackles of sin and death and bring peace through peaceful means. It's no wonder we hear these words and they resonate. Someone coming from a little-known town out in the middle of nowhere to an unknown family without wealth and influence, yet someone who was willing to stand up in the face of violence and oppression, to look at a messed up world and say, things aren't right, and there's something we can do. There's something we can do about that. The deforestation of our world seems hopeless. Yet there are brave people, ordinary people, taking a stand, putting their lives at risk, but saying this is wrong, and we need to pay attention, and we need to do something about it. Systemic racism and hatred in our world seems hopeless, yet there are brave people, ordinary people, fighting for racial justice, saying this is wrong, something about it. Social unrest seems hopeless, yet there are brave people, ordinary people, building community and willing to compromise, benefit all. Saying the division that has torn our communities and country apart isn't right. We can do something about it. There is still hope, the prophet says. And I think we need to listen to the prophet. Micah is still speaking to us all these centuries later. There is hope for us, for our community and world. Are waiting for a hero, some political leader. You are wasting precious time. There are brave people, ordinary people, right here. Right here. Don't have to wait.